Founders of the Future with Joe Mardell. Hi everyone, welcome back to Founders of the Future. Today I'll be speaking with Anne Boysen, who's a Foresight Analyst at Artemis Connection, and she was also the founder at After The Millennials Consulting. And it's great to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. So would you like to just introduce us to what you do as a Foresight Analyst?
In my job as a Foresight Analyst, I help companies and organizations, government, philanthropies, prepare for a type of future that they want, not necessarily predict what the future is going to look like, but help them create that future that they really want. And I use the various different tools. It's part trying to understand what is happening in the macro environment now, what are some weak signals of change, and what sort of opportunities can you see in those pictures, those sort of glimpses of the future, those little pockets of change that you can see here and there.
Awesome. So yeah, I mean, obviously it's really important for companies to try and make the future how they would like it rather than just going with the flow. And with the rate of change of technology, it's even more important than ever. So you use data a lot in your work to obviously help companies with that, looking into the future and stuff. What sort of advice would you have for companies to best prepare for the future and using the new technologies that are coming on? What sort of advice would you have for companies moving forward?
I think what has been common up until very recently is that companies are trying to manage the data to get insight into who are the customers, what are they likely to buy, what are the peculiar differences of the customers that make them be interested in specific parts of their product portfolio, etc. So we've heard a lot about recommendation systems, we've heard a lot about micro-targeting, we've heard a lot about predictive modeling. And all of this is, these are models to help companies understand or better adapt their product offerings to their customers. And I think that a lot of the focus has been on that. I think lesser focus has been on using data to get general trends, to find some of the idiosyncrasies about their customers and figure out what might different customers have in common, what are some new weak signals, some new things that we couldn't have seen. And in those type of, when that is the objective, it's different than just figuring out what can I sell right now, what can I sell to this particular customer. It becomes more a sort of a greater understanding. What does the macro environment around me look like? What does the world that I operate in look like? And what are some of the possible disruptive changes on the horizon based on the data that I'm using? This is a very different type of data modeling, and you can still use a lot of data to understand it, but it takes a little bit of a different approach. For example, you don't use supervised models as often, you use more unsupervised learning, clustering, anomaly detection, and things of that nature. And you probably want to use not only proprietary data, even though you can use a lot of the data that you already have in your existing databases, but you also have to use a lot of unstructured data that you find outside of your corporate walls. And this is very different, but it allows companies and organizations to devise more long-term strategies, medium-term and long-term strategies, and to have more kind of lift the focus a little bit, try to get more of a bird's eye view. And I think it's especially important now when we are, corporate responsibilities becoming more important. It's not enough to just kind of narrowly, use these blindfolds and just like, I'm going to zoom in on this opportunity right here, right now, around the corner, but to lift the focus and understand what is it that my customers really want, and understand them more as a holistic entities, and with all of these other needs. So yeah, I think that's where data is going.
Right, right. And obviously in this day and age, there's more data available to companies than ever before, which is obviously a massive help. But do you find that, I know that you look into the differences between different generations a lot, and that's something that you're passionate about. And I was really interested to find out, as a member of Generation Z, whether there's any differences in the amount of, access to data from a younger generation compared to maybe the older generations, because obviously younger people tend to put out a lot more content online. They're a lot more active on social media and stuff. So do you think it's a little bit easier for companies who might want to market to the younger generation in terms of finding out valuable knowledge about their customer base?
Yeah, I definitely think that young people are leaving more data footprints than older generations. I also think that they're far more clever in curating what they put out as well. So one of the trends that I followed was when I was able to follow, generational trends when social media first busted on the scene, like with MySpace and Facebook back in the days, and kind of seeing the change in the cultural change inside culture, inside social media. And it started off with more of a sort of gullible understanding of the internet, that, here's everything me, like people would just share anything. As I think is maybe as a response to that sort of put yourself out there, don't worry about how many people can get insights to your personal information. I think maybe Gen Z became a little bit warned by that, because they didn't want to share everything about themselves. So you started having Instagram and Instagram, so you could have two public profiles, one which is more authentic than the other. You started having Snapchat, where you could, have these posts that self-destruct. So I think that, your generation came into this world with a far more, I don't know if I should call it educated, but a little bit more understanding of like what you want to portray about yourself and what you want to keep closer to your heart and more private.
Yeah, I
I
agree,
think,
to be fair, because I think my generation, we got to kind of learn from, not the mistakes, but we got to learn from the experiences of people who had been around using social media for a little bit longer than us.
yeah. And I also think that, like, from a technology point of view, it might be harder for organizations to actually use the data. It's some of the older networks lend themselves very easily to natural language processing and text analytics tools. But the newer forms of media, YouTube and TikTok, they're more vision. You have to have pretty comprehensive, computer vision software or models to really dig through a lot of the content. So in order to sort of get the volume of data that you need to really understand it, there's some technological hurdles there as well. And obviously there's, privacy issues too. It's like, when somebody is sharing something online, they don't necessarily, agree to having that data processed and mined. So, there's those issues as well. So, it might seem as there's a lot of data out there, but really, it's not as easy. It takes it's still, the human is still going to need to be at the center of this. It's not like you can just delegate everything to an algorithm or a artificially intelligent app and say that, hey, go out and find all this data and crunch it, and then let's understand how the world works. It doesn't work like that. You still need to have a human to
Right.
to steer that process. Yeah.
Well, your point about how the newer forms of social media are much more visual, and how that makes it more difficult for companies to harness the data, I find that really fascinating, and it hadn't actually occurred to me that would be an issue for companies. Do you see that becoming a trend? Like, do you think it's going to be more and more challenging in the future for companies to use data from online if we're moving towards these more visual ways of doing things on social media?
Well, I actually think that their technology will catch up on it. There's leaps and bounds of progress that are happening in computer vision, NLP. So I actually think that it's soon you're going to have almost like a point and click type of softwares that help companies do that. And that's when we really need to have more ethical conversations. I tend to come from the point of view ethically that it's not the, access to data which is already public, that is not the biggest hurdle isn't there, it's how you use it. So if you only use the data with the intent of, I'm going to see how much I can persuade this person or sell them something, but if the understanding is more like, okay, I really want to understand what is it, like in my research I study your generation because I'm deeply concerned about the future that you're going into. And I want to ensure that those kind of issues are addressed, whether those are expressed, in other media or not. I want to make sure that both companies and governments and philanthropic organizations understand that they're really aligning themselves with the generation that is coming up. So I think that we're going to have those conversations. I think that the technology is going to catch up very soon. And I don't know actually to which extent people, if you have a message and you want it heard, you do go to social media. So I wonder, I think that that's where we're going to have more of the future conversations is how do we use data? Not whether data is accessible or not, but how is it being used? And of course, to ensure that there are privacy barriers, that if you are on a social platform, that whatever is meant to be kept private, that is kept private not only for third parties, but also even for the creators of the app themselves, that they cannot manipulate that data. Like if you have something that is private, it's actually private.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, you're very right in saying that there are a lot of things that social media can be good for. Like if you want to have your voice heard, it's great for getting your voice heard and building an audience. But at the same time, there are a lot of things that I think could be quite damaging with social media. And you touched on some things that concern you for my generation and just the future of social media. Would you mind just delving into that a little bit more? Like what are the things that concern you the most about one of the potential futures for my generation?
Yes. So I think what is so good about the opportunities that you guys have is access to a lot of information that we did not have at the same age, that opens so many doors, and it really ensures that you guys are so much more informed at the same age. So I really think that, and I think that a lot of the activism that we see today is precisely because of that. It's precisely because it's not possible anymore for companies or for politicians to lie. I mean, they can continue to lie, but they're going to be caught, and it's not, it's not just a free for all anymore. That's good. I also think that social media is so the way that those algorithms are optimized is to sort of aspire towards polarization. Unfortunately, that's just how those seem to be optimized, is that the content that generates the most views or clicks or reposts, whatever, those are the ones that are polarized to begin with. And we already know that, you have these Russian bots, and you have all of these sort of farms, these click farms and everything, that they're deliberately trying to play on this because they know that this generates content and it becomes almost addictive. Like you see something that triggers your confirmation bias, and you're just going to continue to go down those rabbit holes. This is very dangerous for collaboration. As long as we live in a democracy, it's really, decisions are being made in wherever we have uncomfortable conversations with people we don't agree with. That's the essence of democracy. That's the essence of free speech. Is the essence of of moving society forward. And I think it's pretty dangerous when we're siloing ourselves. So, I was very optimistic in the beginning because I thought that, well, these technologies ensuring that people who have something in common can make these new alliances in spite of geography, in spite of all of these barriers that once used were in place to keep people apart. And I still think that's great, but at the same time, it also can very quickly evolve into these factions, these sort of trench wars, so that's, and it doesn't help that, with this, there's like this new NLP model, which is called the GPT-3, which has become incredibly authentic in creating content and just like spewing out content that it looks like it's created by humans. And it doesn't help that, and then of course we have deep fakes, we have, these GANs that are creating images and can manipulate images to a point that you can barely notice that this is fake anymore. So when all of that technology enters the scene, suddenly you really amplify that polarization that is already going on. I think that's my deepest fear, to be honest, with social media. And I don't really have an answer to how we could combat that.
Yeah, no, you're right. And these are all things that worry me very much as well. And yeah, it is a shame to see these kind of polarized groups forming because of social media and things like deep fakes and the way that AI is used to make social media a sort of an addictive thing for people, I think is a real shame. And they're some of my least favorite use cases for AI. I'm very passionate about AI, but I really don't think those are very positive for society. But at the same time, I'm optimistic that the same technologies that are being used to do that could also be used to solve those problems. So I think technologies like AI and the other emerging technologies are probably our best hope at solving these. Do you agree? Do you think that there is hope for emerging tech to solve these societal problems and create a more optimistic future?
Absolutely. And that goes back to that first point that I made, that I think that up until now, AI has been optimized towards increasing profits. And whether you measure that profit in eyeballs or in disciples for your view or money, it's a different type. So it's a certain type of optimization. It's perfectly possible. I mean, just look at GANs. Just look at generative adversarial networks. How they are, the logic of them is pretty interesting because it's pretty much two neural networks that plays a game of true or false. So it's basically when you have children, you hold up like these different images, and some of them are silly and some of them are true, like which one is right. It's very interesting in how that works. And of course, in that case, it's optimizing to teach the algorithm to generate an image that looks like a human being, or various ways of teaching a network to simulate reality as much as possible. But the logic behind it is that you can actually you can use possibly some of the same approaches, maybe not the same method, but the same approaches to teach a network to understand. Like you stand here and you recognize which one is created and which is fake and what is true and what is false. So if Facebook or Google or some of these companies have this filter and decide that, okay, we ran this through our GAN, and our GAN is so optimized that you can actually catch other GANs that have created these deep fakes, and we actually identify that this is wrong. And again, I also think that if we use data to help educate people, again, the fact that we have so much data that we have, it would take millennia to download all of the data from the internet, which really means that it's a problem of curation and it's a problem of verification. So if we can just access to the data really is verifiably true, and we can kind of use that data to generate conversations and yeah, create those avenues, those networks that welcome these conversations around things that are verifiably true. It's possible. It's just that no one has decided that is a goal worth pursuing yet. So, but it's possible.
Yeah, and I love the idea of different organizations like Facebook using their AIs to try and prevent other people from using their own AIs to create deep fakes. I find that hilariously ironic but fascinating, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more of that in the future.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear your opinion on sort of what's going to lead the way in terms of innovation in the future. I know you work with a lot of big companies, but I'm very passionate about entrepreneurship, and that's kind of what I'm doing with this podcast. But are you interested in like the future of startups? Do you think there's going to be a lot more innovation coming from the startup scene, or do you think it will be kind of dominated by the big business, big tech companies that we see today?
Good question. I wish I had a magic wand. I really, I actually think that startups is an anomaly. It's not the rational choice. I love entrepreneurs for doing what they're doing, but it can at worst be pretty self-destructive because statistically that most are not going to make it. And I sound
of course.
so negative when I say this. I know it's terrible.
It's just the facts, though, isn't it? It's the statistics.
Yeah, it's the statistics, and thank the higher power that there are people who do it, because I think it would be a dangerous place where everything is controlled by one company or something. But at the same time, I think that's the human ingenuity. We want to do, we have dreams and we have aspirations, and as long as we have dreams and aspirations, we're going to continue to do it. So in spite of all of the risk, there are going to be startups in the future, absolutely. I think maybe some of the logistics around it might have to change, because I honestly don't, unless we really, implement policies that make it less dire, less, if you're going to lose your life savings, or maybe even if you have reverse mortgage your house to fund your startup, this is a scary economy to do that in. So I wonder if we will hopefully in the future see policies that are geared more towards helping people who want to start their own companies. I'm not sure. I hope that we will see that, but I also hope that maybe some of the big companies can see the value in, having small startups that are completely, understand that it's helping them to have these small startups that are on the outside. Of course, entrepreneurship, there's a lot of startups inside big companies as well. So we might see more of that. But.
True. Yeah, no, I agree. I hope that there is more of that in the future. And something that I've been thinking a lot about recently is that, in the digital revolution, with the start of like the internet and social media and stuff, we saw a few big companies that dominated their industries taking a big hit because there was startups that got on the trend. And those big companies, like, for example, Blockbuster with Netflix, maybe Kodak with the digital camera revolution, they didn't see that exponential trend early enough and they took it for granted. I feel like there is potential for that to happen again with the fourth industrial revolution. But at the same time, because of these horror stories, I feel like corporations will be more prepared this time, and maybe they don't want to be the next Blockbuster. Do you think that there's going to be some very household names that we know taking a hit, or do you think they're going to be prepared for this?
I absolutely do think that they still stand that risk, because there's something that happens in larger organizations. You know, you have more people in it, and people have, you know, their own interests, and suddenly, you know, what used to be, when you have a startup, you know, you have a unified goal and you don't have too many people, so you can spearhead your way towards that goal. It's much faster and it's much more clear. When you have a large organization, it's much harder to keep that spirit. So you know, it might be like you know, a steam engine that takes forever to, you know,
yeah.
gear up, whereas you have a little powerboat that can zip through, right? And that's why I think you're going to see a lot of these big companies continue to just simply buy up the startup once the startups are.
That's right.
So I think that's going to continue to be the dynamic. But I do really feel like, you know, if we're going to have that environment where people are going to take that risk, it really, you know, I feel at the moment, I feel like there's a lot of moms and dads and mortgages and, you know, people's dreams, like their own savings are put on the line in order to save innovation for the future. And I hope that, you know, it becomes a little bit more easier for startup companies to navigate that. Maybe some universal basic income or something that makes it a little bit easier for startups.
Too right. I'm with you on that. And just before we finish up, I think if you would like to kind of tell the listeners where they can find you online, because we're just getting to the end of our half hour, but if you'd like people to check out your content on maybe YouTube, LinkedIn, if you just want to let them know where they can find you.
Yes, I have, I'm on all the different social networks, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. Well, I'm not on TikTok. Sorry, I'm too old for that. I probably should set up a TikTok channel, but I'm not very good at dancing, so nothing to do.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I have a website called afterthemillennials.com. It's been pretty dormant for a while, but you can check me out there, and I'm hoping to revise it. I'm thinking of a brand change there soon, so that's exciting. And then you can read a little bit about my generational content. I'm also a member of futures.com, the think tank there, so I sometimes post articles there, so you can contact me there. And yeah, just contact me and get in touch.
Exciting stuff. Yeah, make sure to check out After the Millennials to check out that new branding. I'll put all of the links in the description of this video, so make sure to go and follow Anne on all of those different social media platforms. Thank you so much for this opportunity to learn and expand my knowledge of Foresight. It's been a really interesting experience.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on.
Anytime. Welcome back anytime. All right. Take care.
You too. Take care.